They tell you courage has a smell. On my world it does. When a Vihenari warrior stands his ground, his throat glands release a bitter musk, sharp like burnt copper, and the whole squad can taste it in the recycled air of a dropship. We are raised to trust that smell. It means the one beside you will not run. The human had no smell at all. That is where I should begin. Not with the battle everyone talks about now, not with the moment his name got carved into the wall of the Remembrance Hall on Station Caldine. I want to begin with the smell, or the absence of it, because that absence is the first thing that ever frightened me about them. And I am a soldier who has faced the Grethul war broods in the dark of a collapsing moon. I do not use the word frightened lightly. My name is Osk Renvale. I served 19 cycles in the combined fleets before my knee stopped bending the way a knee should, and now I sit in the visitor gardens of Caldine and tell this story to anyone patient enough to listen. Most are not. The young ones think they already know it. They have seen the reconstructions, the little glowing figures acting out the siege in the education halls. They think they understand. They understand nothing. I was there. Let me tell you what actually happened. Caldine was not always the shrine it is now. Back then, it was a forward supply station orbiting a dead gas giant called Ool, a fat brown thing that filled half the sky and never gave us anything but static in our long-range comms. We called that world the Deaf God, because it swallowed signals and gave nothing back. The station itself was ugly. I will be honest, because honesty is the only thing worth passing on to the young. Caldine was a stack of docking rings welded onto an old ore processor, and it groaned when it turned, a deep metal groan you learned to sleep through. The lights in the lower decks flickered on a rhythm nobody ever fixed. The air tasted faintly of rust and machine coolant, and the sweet rot of too many species breathing the same recycled breath. There were 9 species on that station in those days. 9. We were a coalition then, thrown together by a war none of us started and none of us knew how to end. The Grethul had come out of the Vale Cluster 40 cycles before I was born, and they did not want territory the way we understood it. They wanted the silence after. They ate worlds down to bare rock and left them humming with a low radiation nobody could scrub clean. You fought them or you became one of the humming worlds. Those were the choices. So we fought. Vihenari and Silmiri and the tall, cold Ithrix, the burrowing Doc, the winged Eltari who could barely stand full gravity, all of us crammed into stations like Caldine, learning each other's insults and each other's smells, dying in each other's arms when the drop went bad. And then in my 11th cycle of service, the humans came. You have to understand what that meant. Nobody had heard of them. They arrived late to the war, from a spur of the galaxy so far out on the edge that our star charts marked it empty, surveyed, no viable biospheres. Someone had surveyed it wrong. Or the humans had simply been small and quiet at the time and had gotten loud very fast, which is a thing I would later learn is very much their way. When the first human ship docked at Caldine, half the station came out to look. I remember standing on the observation gantry with my squadmate Threll, a Silmiri gunner with skin like wet river stone, and both of us watching this stubby gray vessel ease into the docking cradle. It had no elegance. Our ships curved. The Ithrix built theirs like blades. The human ship looked like someone had bolted a fist to an engine and told it to go. "That is a warship?" Threll asked. His voice came out through his neck vents in that whistling way the Silmiri have. "It has guns," I said. "So does a mining barge." We laughed. I want you to remember that we laughed because it will matter later how easy it was to laugh at them. The airlock cycled, and out came the humans. They were smaller than I expected. That was the first surprise. In the war stories that had already started drifting across the coalition, have you heard about the human worlds? Have you heard what they did at the Sarn Reach? I had built them up in my mind into giants. But the ones who walked off that ship came up only to my chest plate, soft-skinned. No natural armor, no claws worth the name. Little flat faces with 2 eyes set forward like a predator's. which was the only thing about them that looked dangerous, and even that seemed like a mistake of biology rather than a threat. There were 11 of them, and in the front walked the one this whole story is about. His name was Corin Voss. I did not know his name yet, of course. On that first day he was just a human, one soft creature among 10 others, wearing scuffed gray armor with a unit mark I did not recognize. But I noticed him. You always notice him, later people would say, as if it were obvious. It was not obvious. He was not the largest. He did not have the loudest voice. He walked a half step behind another human, a woman with silver in her hair whom the rest called Commander Ise. What I noticed was how still he was. We Vihenari are always moving. Our tails counterbalance, our ears track sound, our throat glands work constantly. The Solmiri ripple. The Altari's wings never fully settle. Life to us is motion. But this human stood at the base of the ramp while his commander spoke with our station master, and he did not move at all. His eyes went slow across the crowd of us, all 9 species, all our teeth and horns and strange limbs, and he took us in the way you take in weather. Not afraid. Not impressed. Just accounting. Later I would understand that word better than I wanted to. Accounting. Humans are always accounting. But that day I only felt a small cold thing move down my spine, and I could not have told you why. Threll leaned close to me. The little ones, he whistled. They came a long way to die. I nodded, because that is what we all thought. They came a long way to die. The thing about their bodies. I served alongside Corin Voss for 216 days before the siege. I want to give you those days because the young ones skip them. They want the climax. They want the terrifying truth, the big reveal, the moment the whole coalition understood. But the truth was not one moment. The truth was those 216 days, accumulating drop by drop, until it filled us up so full we could not pretend anymore. So let me tell you the small things first. The first was the running. Humans run. Not in bursts the way a proper predator runs. A Vihenari can outsprint anything on 4 legs or 2 for maybe 100 body lengths, and then we are spent, our hearts screaming, and we have to stop. That is how muscle works. That is how life works. You explode, you strike, you rest. Humans do not rest. I first saw it on the training deck, the long curved corridor we used for conditioning. I was doing my rounds, 6 laps at a pace that would drop most species, and the human Corin fell into stride beside me. I did not slow. I sped up. Vihenari pride is a stupid thing, but it is a real thing, and I was not going to be paced by a soft little edge-worlder. I broke away from him easily. Of course I did. My legs are built for it. Then I finished my 6 laps and stopped, chest heaving, throat glands burning, and I sat on the deck to recover the way any sane creature would. And Corin kept running. He did not speed up when I stopped. He did not slow down. He just continued. Same steady rhythm, lap after lap after lap. I watched him and my breath came back and he was still running. I got up and got a water ration and came back and he was still running. His pale skin had gone shining with moisture, a thing humans do. They leak water from their skin to cool themselves, which struck me as grotesque and then, as I kept watching, struck me as something else. He ran for 2 hours. Not fast, never fast. But he did not stop, and he did not need to stop, and when he finally slowed to a walk it was because his shift was starting, not because his body had failed him. His body did not fail him. That was the thing. His body had no quit in it. I asked him about it later in the mess hall in the broken trade-speak we all used. You run long, I said. It was not much of a sentence. I was not much for talk. He looked up at me with those forward-set eyes. Persistence hunting, he said. I did not know the words. He saw that. Long time ago, he said, slow, letting the translator catch up, on my world before tools. We could not outrun the animals we hunted. Too fast, so we did not outrun them. He took a bite of his ration. We followed them, walked, kept walking. The animal runs, gets tired, rests. We arrive, it runs again, we keep walking, it rests less. We arrive again. He shrugged, a human gesture I was still learning. We followed until the animal could not run anymore. Then we walked up to it, and that was that. I sat very still. My food went cold. How long, I asked, did you follow? Days, Corin said. Sometimes days. Days, they would walk after a creature for days. Not sprinting, not striking, not doing the honest violence of a predator that kills and is done. They would simply keep coming, hour after hour, while their prey exhausted itself into a standing collapse, and then they would stroll up and finish it, calm as you like. I thought about being the animal in that story. I thought about running with everything I had, again and again, and looking back each time to see the soft little upright thing still walking toward me. Never faster, never slower, never stopping. I did not sleep well that night. The thing about their wounds. The second small thing was the wounds. We took a bad drop in my 112th day at Caldine. A supply run to a listening post on one of Ull's moons had gone wrong. The Grethool had gotten there first, seeded the ice with their crawling minds, and 3 of us came back on stretchers. One of them was Corin. He had lost part of his leg. Below the knee, the strange human knee that bends only one way, the limb was simply gone, cauterized black by the mind flash. On a Vihenari that is a death wound or near it. Our blood does not clot fast. We are built to strike and flee, not to survive the striking. A limb like that on my kind, and you bleed out before the medics reach you. Corin did not bleed out. I was in the medical bay when they brought him in, because Threll had taken shrapnel and I would not leave his side. So I saw the human on the next table. I saw the Silmiri medic, old Vess, freeze up when she looked at the wound, because she did not know human anatomy and she was afraid to touch it wrong. And I heard Corin talk her through it. Understand this. Half his leg was gone. He was gray with shock, his skin gone the color of ash, his breath fast and shallow, and he was talking, calm, instructing, tourniquet higher, no higher. There is an artery, you will feel it pulse, clamp it. Yes. Now the pressure. He walked that terrified medic through saving his own life, while the pain must have been a white fire in every nerve he had. At one point he passed out, just for a moment. His eyes rolled and his head dropped. Then he woke up and kept giving instructions from where he had left off. I have seen brave creatures. I told you I have faced the war broods. Bravery is common in a war. The war burns out the cowards fast and leaves you surrounded by the brave. But bravery, real bravery, has a cost that shows. The brave Vihenari trembles. The brave Ithrix goes rigid and silent, fighting his own body to stay in place. Bravery is a thing you do against your flesh, which is screaming to run. Corin's flesh was not screaming, or if it was, he had simply turned it down. Set it aside, filed it under later. His body was pouring pain into him at a rate that would have shattered any of us, and he was using the clear, cold part of his mind to solve the problem in front of him, as calmly as if he were reading a supply manifest. They saved the leg stump. Fitted him with a prosthetic 3 weeks later, a crude thing, and he learned to walk on it in 9 days. 9 days. He was running again in a month. I asked him a stupid thing, but I could not help it. Did it not hurt? He looked at me like the question was strange. Of course it hurt, he said. Then how? Hurt is information, Corin said. It tells you something is wrong. Once you know what's wrong, you don't need it anymore. He tapped the side of his head. So you turn it down. Deal with the wrong thing. Turn the hurt back up later if you have time. Usually you don't have time. He said it so simply, as if pain were a light on a control panel that you could dim when it got distracting. I went and found Threll in the recovery ward, and I told him what the human had said. And Threll, who is not easily disturbed, Threll who once cracked jokes while his own arm was being set, Threll went quiet. They can turn off pain, he whistled at last. Not off, I said. Down, he said, down. That is worse, Threll said. And he was right. It was worse. A thing that cannot feel pain is broken, malfunctioning, and it will destroy itself carelessly. But a thing that feels pain fully and chooses to keep going anyway, that is not broken. That is something with a will bolted onto a body, and the will is the one in command. I began to watch the humans more carefully after that. The thing about their fear. The third small thing was the hardest to see, because it was a thing that was not there. Every species fears. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. Fear is the oldest teacher. It kept our ancestors out of the deep water and away from the things with too many teeth. A creature without fear is a creature that walks off cliffs. We understood, all 9 of us, that our young were braver than our old precisely because they had not yet learned enough fear, and we did not envy them the ignorance. Humans feared, I want to be clear, they were not fearless. I saw human fear plenty of times before a drop. In the long bad hours of waiting, I would see their skin go tight and their breath go short, and their eyes flick to the airlock. They knew fear the way we all knew it. But they did something with it that none of us did. They talked to it. I learned this from a human named Dea, a young Comstech who bunked 2 doors down from the section I shared with Threll. Dea was frightened before every drop, badly, worse than the others. Her hands would shake. And one night before a run I saw her sitting alone in the corridor, her back against the cold metal, and she was speaking, quietly, to no one. I thought she was praying. Many species pray. But I listened, and she was not praying to any god. She was talking to herself. She was saying, okay. You're scared, that's fine. Scared means you're paying attention. Now what are you scared of specifically? The drop, okay. What about the drop? Falling, right. But you've dropped 40 times and the harness held 40 times, so the harness is probably fine. What else? The landing zone. Okay, you don't have data on the landing zone, so that fear is honest. Keep that one. The rest, put it down. You don't need to carry the rest. And I watched her hands stop shaking. Not all the way, but mostly. She took her fear, and she interrogated it. She pulled it apart into pieces, kept the pieces that were useful, and simply set the rest aside like a soldier stripping unneeded weight from a pack before a long march. When she stood up to go to the drop bay, she was still afraid, but she had chosen exactly how afraid to be, and of what, and she carried only that. I told Threll. By then Threll had stopped laughing at anything I told him about the humans. They argue with their own fear, I said, and they win. Threll's neck vents worked slowly, the Silmiri equivalent of a long exhale. We do not do that, he said. When I am afraid, I am afraid. The fear owns me until it burns off. I know. They own the fear. I know. We sat with that for a while in the groaning dark of Caldine, the lights flickering on their broken rhythm. Somewhere below us the station turned, and the deaf god filled the ports with its blank brown face, swallowing all our signals, giving nothing back. Ask, Thrill said finally, I am glad they are on our side. I did not answer, because I was thinking a thought I did not want to say out loud. I was thinking, are they? Not that I doubted their loyalty. They fought the Grethul as hard as any of us, harder. But I was beginning to understand that the humans were not on anyone's side, not really, not the way we meant it. They were on the side of the problem in front of them. Right now the problem was the Grethul, and so they fought the Grethul, with that same steady, endless persistence they used on their prey. And I did not want to think about what it would mean to be a problem in front of a human, once the Grethul were gone. I filed the thought away. Turned it down, you might say. I was learning from them already, and I did not even know it. Corin between the battles. I have made the humans sound like monsters, and I did not mean to. That is the trouble with telling this story. The truths are frightening, and if I only tell the frightening parts, you will think they were cruel or cold or empty. They were not. Corin Voss, in the long stretches between the fighting, was the gentlest soldier I ever served with. He learned our names, all of them from every species, even the ones with the throat clicks that human mouths could barely shape. He tried to shape them anyway and got them wrong and laughed at himself and tried again until he got them right. Do you know how rare that is? Most of us gave up on cross-species names and used numbers or ranks. Corin learned mine. He said it's slightly wrong for weeks, Osk, with too much bite on the front, and then one day he said it right, Osk, soft, and grinned at me like he'd won something. He grieved our dead as if they were his own. After a bad drop, we lost an Eltari flyer named Syl, a bright, quick creature, barely more than a youngling. Her whole species mourns by folding their wings over their faces and going silent for a full station day, and none of the rest of us knew what to do, how to sit with a grief we could not share. Corin did. He came and sat beside the folded, silent Eltari, and he did not speak, and he did not touch them, he just sat, for the whole day, present. So they would not be alone in their silence, even if they were alone in their grief. When it was over, the eldest Eltari unfolded her wings and looked at the human for a long moment, and then she bent her long neck to him, which is a bow, which is a thing the Eltari do not do for outsiders. He carried water for the wounded. He fixed the broken lights on the lower decks that nobody had fixed in 20 cycles, not because he was ordered to, but because they bothered him, because he was a creature that saw a broken thing and could not rest until it worked. He taught the young doc to play a human game with small painted stones, and he lost to them on purpose, badly, until they figured out he was doing it and got furious and made him play for real. He was kind. I want that on the record. Whatever else is true about the humans, and much of it is frightening, he was kind, and the kindness was not a mask over the frightening thing. The kindness and the frightening thing were the same thing, and it took me a long time to understand that, and when I finally did, it was in the middle of the worst night of my life. Let me take you there now. Let me take you to the siege. The deaf god goes dark. It began with the deaf god going dark. I told you that Ool swallowed signals. What I did not tell you is that it also hid things. A gas giant that big, that loud with static, is a perfect place to hide a fleet. Our sensors could not see through it. We knew this. We had always known this. It was the reason Kaldheim was placed where it was, to watch the approaches to Ool. Because if the Grethul ever came through the Vale cluster in force, they would use the deaf god to mask their approach. They came on the 211th day. There was no warning because that was the entire point. One moment the long-range boards were clear. The next, the whole side of Ool facing us lit up with drive flares, dozens of them, then hundreds, blooming out of the brown static like fire eating through paper. A Grethul war brood, a full one, more ships than Kaldheim had ever been meant to face. The station's alarm was an old ore processor klaxon, a flat, ugly braying sound, and it filled every corridor at once. I was asleep when it started. I came up out of my bunk already reaching for my weapon, and Threll was already on his feet, his riverstone skin gone pale with adrenaline, and through the port I could see the fire spreading across the face of the deaf god, and I knew. We all knew. The whole station knew in an instant the way a herd knows. We were going to die here. Kaldheim had a garrison of maybe 400 soldiers across all 9 species. We had a handful of defense platforms and 1 wing of short-range fighters and a hull that groaned when it turned. Against a full war brood, we were not a fortress. We were a speed bump. Our death would buy the coalition maybe 6 hours of warning before the Grethul pushed deeper into the sector, and that was the whole of our value now. 6 hours, paid in 400 lives. The station master, an old Ithrix named Keith, came onto the general channel. His voice was flat and cold, as Ithrix voices always are, but I heard the thing underneath it. All hands. The evacuation transports are launching now with the wounded and the non-combatants. They need time to reach jump distance. We will give them that time. A pause. There is no relief fleet. I will not lie to you. Hold as long as you can. That is all. That was all. I looked at Threll. Threll looked at me. Neither of us said anything because there was nothing to say. We had known this day might come every day of our service. Now it was here. We would go to the docking rings, and we would fight, and we would die, and the transports would carry the wounded to safety, and someday someone might carve our names on a wall. That was the deal we had made when we put on the uniform. We had always known. And then the humans changed the deal. 11 against a war brood. There were 11 humans on Caldine. I told you that at the start. 11, led by Commander Issei, with Corin Voss a half-step behind her. By the logic of the situation, the humans should have been on the transports. I want you to understand this clearly because it is the hinge of the whole story. The humans were the smallest contingent. They were outsiders, edge-worlders, latecomers to a war that was not originally theirs. No one would have thought less of them for boarding the evacuation ships. They had a ship of their own in the docking cradle, that ugly gray fist of a vessel. They could have simply left, uncoupled, burned for the jump line, and been gone before the Gretel closed the distance. Their loyalty did not require them to die for a station full of species they had known for 200 days. Any sane creature would have left. I saw Commander Issei on the command deck as I passed it on my way to my post. She was standing at the tactical display with the fire of the war brood reflected in her eyes, and old Keith, the Ithrix, was saying something to her, and I slowed to listen, because I have never been good at not listening. Keith was telling her to go. "You have a jump-capable ship," he said in that flat, cold Ithrix voice. "Take your people, carry the warning yourselves. That is a better use of you than dying here." And Commander Issei, the silver-haired human, the one they all followed, she looked at the display for a moment. She looked at the incoming fire, at the numbers, at the math of it, the way humans always look at the math. Then she said, "How long do the transports need?" Keith said, 6 hours to jump distance. "They will not get it. We can hold perhaps 2. And Issei said, "Then we'll get you to 6. That was it, that was all. She did not make a speech. She did not talk about honor or sacrifice or the bonds of the coalition. She looked at a problem. The transports need 6 hours. The station can only buy 2. And she treated the 4 missing hours as a thing to be solved. The way Corin had treated his own severed leg as a thing to be solved, calmly, from inside the pain. Keith stared at her. Even the flat, cold Ithrix face could show shock if you knew how to read it, and I knew how. "You cannot," he said. "The numbers." "I know the numbers," Issa said. "Give me command of the docking rings. I'll get you your 6 hours. And here is the thing I have never been able to explain to the young ones, no matter how I try." Keith gave it to her. An Ithrix station master, a creature of rank and protocol and 40 cycles of war, handed command of the defense to an edge-worlder who came up to his chest. He did it because, in that moment, he understood something about her that he did not have words for. He understood that she was not being brave. She was being certain. There is a difference. Bravery is doing a thing while afraid it will fail. Certainty is doing a thing because you have already decided it will not. And human certainty, I would learn that night, is the most terrifying force in the galaxy because it does not care what the numbers say. The numbers said 2 hours. Issei had decided on 6. And she had 11 soft little soldiers and a station full of the rest of us. And she was going to bend reality until it gave her the 4 hours it did not want to give. The rings. They put me on the 3rd docking ring with Threll and a mixed squad. 2 Doc, an Ithrix, 3 other Vihenari, and a human. The human was Corin. I was not glad about it. I want to be honest because the young ones make him a saint and he was not a saint. When I saw Corin assigned to my ring, my first feeling was a low dread because I had spent 200 days watching the humans and I had learned that where they went, the frightening thing went with them. I did not want to see the frightening thing up close. I wanted to die a clean Vihenari death, striking and falling, the way my ancestors died. I did not want to learn any more human truths. I learned the biggest one that night anyway. The Gretel came for the docking rings, because that is where they always come. They are boarders. Their warbroods do not simply destroy a station. They take it, flooding the corridors with their crawling soldiers, because a Gretel does not want rubble. It wants the humming silence of a world eaten alive, and to eat a station alive they must come inside. The third ring's outer airlock was a wide armored throat, and beyond it through the ports we could see the boarding pods coming. Dozens of them, black barbed things, each one packed with Gretel war forms, spinning toward us across the dark with the fire of the deaf god behind them. Corin set us up. I outranked him, technically. But when he started giving positions, I found myself moving to the one he pointed me to, and so did everyone else, because he did it with that human certainty, and certainty is a thing that pulls you along whether you decided to follow or not. Osk, he said, you and Threll on the high angle. When they breach, you don't fire at the first ones through. You wait. You let them fill the throat. Then you take the ones in the back, the ones nobody else can reach. Understand? I understood. It was good tactics. Let the frontline squads handle the breach and use the two of us with the best sightlines to kill the reserves before they could reinforce. Cold, efficient, human. How long? I asked him, because I had heard Isi on the command deck. I knew the number. Corin looked at me. His soft, flat face, his forward-set predator's eyes, calm in the flickering red of the alarm lights. 6 hours, he said. That is not possible. No, he agreed, it isn't. And then he smiled, a small human smile, the kind he'd smiled the day he finally said my name right. So we'll do it anyway. The airlock began to glow where the first pod struck it. And the frightening thing came into the world. The long hour of blood. I have tried over the cycles to describe the fighting on the third ring, and I have never managed it, because the truth is that most of it is gone from me. It became a smear, a red roar. This is normal. The mind does not keep the worst hours whole, it keeps them in pieces, and you assemble the pieces later into something that only pretends to be a memory. So I will not lie to you and give you a smooth account. I will give you the pieces. I remember the first breach. The airlock did not open, it failed, the metal going molten and then gone, and the Gretel poured through, and they were exactly as horrible as they always are. Too many legs, too many joints, the wet clicking of them, the smell of them, ammonia and rot. The front squads met them, and the throat of the ring became a killing floor. I remember waiting, Threll beside me, both of us on the high angle, both of us aching to fire, every instinct screaming to strike now, and Corin's voice calm cutting through. Not yet. Wait. Let them fill it. And we waited against everything in our blood because he was certain and we were not. I remember the moment he said, now. And Threll and I opened up on the packed reserves at the back of the breach. And it was slaughter, and it was right. It was the good, clean, tactical killing that wins battles. And for a moment I understood the appeal of thinking like a human, of setting aside the screaming blood instinct and simply solving the problem. I remember the first hour ending and looking at the counter on my sleeve and not believing it. 1 hour. We had held 1 hour, already longer than anyone thought possible. I remember the doc dying. Both of them within minutes of each other, and the way Corin moved to fill the gap in the line without hesitation, without grief, folding the grief up and setting it aside for later, always later, and fighting on in the space where the dead had been. I remember the second hour, the third. By the third hour, we should all have been dead. We were not dead, and I began, dimly, through the red roar, to understand why we were not dead, and the understanding was the most frightening thing of all. What the Gretel learned. The Gretel are not stupid. This is the thing people forget. They had eaten 100 worlds. They knew war. They came at us with tactics, with feints and floods and the patient cruelty of a thing that has done this many times. And they could not understand the humans. I saw it happen. I saw the Gretel learn to fear, And the Gretel do not fear, they are the thing that makes fear, and I watched them learn it in the throat of the third ring. Here is what I mean. Every species the Gretel had ever fought they had beaten the same way, by being relentless, by simply never stopping. You could hold a Gretel warbrood for a while, but they would keep coming, wave after wave, patient and endless, until your soldiers' bodies gave out, because all bodies give out. The Vihenari exhaust, the Silmiri overheat. The Ithrics, for all their cold discipline, have muscles that fail like any muscle fails. The Gretel had won 100 wars by being the thing that outlasts. They had never met a thing that outlasts them. I watched Comrades fight for 4 hours without stopping. Not without resting, I told you. Humans do not rest the way we rest. Without stopping. The persistence hunter's gift. His prosthetic leg, the crude one he'd learned to walk on in 9 days, held under him hour after hour. His soft body poured sweat and did not fail. When the Gretel surged, he met them. When they pulled back to regroup, he did not collapse in relief like the rest of us. He used the pause, resetting the line, dragging the wounded back, reloading, drinking water in quick disciplined swallows. And then he was ready again before we were, always before we were. The Gretel threw themselves at us in waves, expecting our bodies to break. The human's body would not break. And somewhere in the third hour, I saw the Gretel do a thing I had never seen them do. A wave came to the breach and hesitated. They hesitated. It was small, a stutter in the clicking flood, a half-second where the front war forms did not want to be the ones who went first. Because they had learned, in the animal way that even the Gretel can learn, that going first at the human meant dying, and the human did not tire, and there was no wave number large enough to outlast a thing that did not tire. They had come to eat a world. They had found at the throat of one shabby docking ring a predator that would follow them for days. And they, the eaters of worlds, the makers of fear, felt for the first time in their long, horrible existence what it is to be the animal in the persistence hunt. To run and rest and look back and see the soft, upright thing still coming, never faster, never slower, never stopping. I understood then. I understood the terrifying truth, and I want to tell you exactly what it is, because everyone gets it wrong. The terrifying truth. The young ones think the terrifying truth about humans is that they are strong, or brave, or that they can turn off pain, or argue with their fear, or run for days. It is none of those things. Those are only the symptoms. The terrifying truth is this. Humans do not accept the numbers. Every other species in the galaxy, all 9 on that station, all the hundreds the Gretel had eaten, we all in the end believe in the numbers. When the math says you have lost, you have lost. When the enemy has more ships, more soldiers, more time, then you fight bravely and you die well, and you accept that the universe is a place with rules, and one of the rules is that the larger force wins. This is not cowardice. It is sanity. It is the deepest wisdom any species learns. Know when you are beaten. Humans never learned it. Or no, that is not right either. They learned it. They understand the numbers better than any of us. I told you they are always accounting. Corin knew exactly how impossible 6 hours was. Ise knew. They ran the math and the math said no, and they looked at the no and they did not accept it. Not out of ignorance, out of refusal. They see the same universe we see, with the same cruel rules, and they simply decide the rules do not get to be the last word. They take the impossible thing 6 hours instead of 2, a war brood held by 400 soldiers, a leg regrown by will, and they treat it not as a fact but as an argument they intend to win, and they will pour every hour of pain and blood and refusal they have into winning it. And they do not stop, they do not tire, they do not accept, they just keep coming, and the universe, which has never in all its ages met a thing that refuses to be beaten, does not know what to do with them. That is the terrifying truth. Not that humans are strong, stronger things exist. The terrifying truth is that when you have beaten a human, truly beaten them, by every measure that has ever meant beaten, They will look at you with those forward-set predator's eyes, and they will not know that they have lost, because to them losing is not a fact that happens to them. It is a decision that only they can make, and they will not make it. They will just keep coming. I understood this in the 4th hour, on the 3rd ring, with the deaf god burning in the ports and the Grethul learning to be afraid, and it did not comfort me that the humans were on our side. It terrified me more, because I thought, what happens someday when we are the numbers they refuse to accept? I filed the thought away. I turned it down. There was a battle to survive. I had learned that from them too. The 5th hour. Corin was hit in the 5th hour. A Grethul barblance caught him through the side, punched clean through his soft body and out the back, and I saw it happen from the high angle, and I heard myself make a sound I did not know I could make. I had, at some point in that long red night, without deciding to, started to care whether the human lived. He went down, the line buckled where he fell. The Grethul, sensing it, surged. The Eaters of Worlds always know when a defender falls. They can smell the gap the way we smell courage. And for one horrible moment the throat of the 3rd ring began to open, began to fail, and I thought, this is it. This is where the 4 hours ends. This is where the transports fall short of jump distance and everyone dies. And then Corin got up. He should not have. I want to be as clear as I have ever been about anything. A barblance through the body is a killing wound. He was bleeding, humans do bleed, red, so much red, and his soft face had gone the ash gray I had seen in the medical bay 100 days before, and by every law of every species he should have stayed down and died like a sane creature dies. He got up. He got up the way he had woken from unconsciousness on the medical table and simply resumed his instructions where he'd left off. He got up the way he'd learned to walk on a dead leg in 9 days. He got up because staying down was a thing the universe wanted from him, and he had decided the universe did not get to have it. He pressed one hand over the hole in his side. With the other he raised his weapon, and he stepped back into the gap in the line, into the space where he had fallen, and he faced the surging Grethul, this soft, dying edge-worlder who came up to my chest plate, and he did not shout anything heroic. He just set his feet and started firing, calm, steady, accounting, killing the ones in front and then the ones behind them, and his blood ran down and pooled around that crude prosthetic leg, and he did not stop. The Grethul hesitated again. Longer this time. They had put a killing wound through the human, and the human had stood back up, and something in their world-eating minds broke a little at the sight of it. Because if you cannot kill a thing by killing it, if you put the lance through its body, and it simply rises and keeps coming, then what is left? What weapon do you have against a creature that treats its own death as an inconvenience to be scheduled for later? They had no weapon against it. Nobody does. That is the terrifying truth, standing on one dead leg in a pool of its own blood, refusing to fall. I came down from the high angle. I do not remember deciding to. I found myself beside him in the gap, Threll on his other side, the 3 of us and what was left of the squad, and we held the line the human had refused to lose, and I fought harder in that hour than I had ever fought in my life, because I was ashamed. I was ashamed that a soft little edge-worlder was teaching a Vihenari war veteran what it meant to not accept the numbers. We held. Corin fired until his weapon ran dry, and then he used it as a club, and then Threll put a fresh charge in his hand and he fired some more, and the blood kept running, and the ash gray of his face went grayer, and he did not stop. He did not stop. He did not stop. 6 hours. The counter on my sleeve reached 6 hours at the exact moment. The command channel crackled with old Keith's flat, cold voice. Transports have reached jump distance. All transports away. Repeat, all transports away. The wounded are safe. A pause. And then the Ithric station master, that creature of 40 cycles of protocol, said a thing I have never heard an Ithric say before or since. He said, You did it, ancestors witness, you actually did it. The transports were gone, the wounded were safe. The warning would reach the coalition. Everything the 400 of us had been meant to buy, we had bought. And then we had bought 4 hours more, 4 impossible hours, because 11 humans had refused to accept the numbers, and had dragged the rest of us along into their refusal. I looked at Corin. He was still standing in the gap. The Gretel had pulled back, not defeated, never defeated but reconsidering, the whole war brood hesitating in the way I had watched them learn to hesitate all night. And Corin stood there in his pool of blood, one hand over the hole in his side, and he looked at the counter on his own sleeve, and he saw the 6 hours, and he did a thing I will remember until I die. He nodded. Just once, a small human nod. The nod of a creature checking a completed item off a list. 6 hours. Done. And having done the impossible thing he had decided to do, having won the argument with the universe that the universe never agreed to have, only then, did he let himself fall. I caught him. I want the young ones to know that. When the Saint of Chaldean finally fell, it was a VNRE war veteran who caught him, because I had come down from the high angle to stand in the gap he refused to lose, and I was there, and I caught him before he hit the deck. He weighed almost nothing. That surprised me even then. All that refusal, all that terror, all that will bolted onto a body, and the body itself was so light, so soft, so easy to break. It had never been about the body. I understood that with him limp in my arms. The frightening thing about humans had never been in their flesh. It was in the part of them that decided their flesh did not get a vote. 6 hours, he said. His voice was very quiet now. The gray had almost won. 6 hours, I told him. You did it, rest now, please. And Corin Voss, half dead, run through. 5 hours passed when any sane creature would have stopped. Corin Voss looked up at me with those forward-set eyes, and he smiled, that same small smile, and he said the last thing I ever heard him say. He said, later. Then he closed his eyes. What the Gretel did. The war brood withdrew. I have to tell you this part carefully, because it is the part that got argued about for cycles afterward, in the war colleges and the command halls, and everyone had a theory, and most of the theories were wrong. The Gretel withdrew from Chaldean. A full war brood, hundreds of ships, more than enough to have finished us, and they broke off and went back into the static of the deaf god and did not come out. They left a shabby half-dead station, a garrison down to 100 exhausted survivors, a defense that by every calculation they should have been able to grind flat in another hour. They left. The theories said it was strategic, that the 6-hour delay had cost them their window, that the coalition warning meant a bigger fleet incoming, that the math had simply changed. The theories were full of numbers. But I stood in the throat of the third ring, holding a dying human, and I watched the last of the Gretel pull back through the failed airlock, and I saw the way they moved. I had watched those things for 11 cycles. I knew how they moved when they were retreating strategically, and I knew how they moved when they were doing the other thing. They were doing the other thing. They were fleeing. The eaters of worlds, the makers of fear, were fleeing a station they had already beaten, because they had met, in the throat of one shabby docking ring, a thing they could not eat, a thing you put a lance through and it stood back up, a thing that did not tire and did not break and did not accept, that would follow you for days across the dark, never faster, never slower, never stopping. They had felt, for the first time in their long, horrible existence, what it is to be prey, and a predator that suddenly learns it is prey does not calculate, it runs. They ran from the humans. I think that is the true reason. I have thought about it for the rest of my life, and I have never found a better one. The Gretel had conquered 100 worlds by being the thing that outlasts, and they had just learned in 6 impossible hours that somewhere out on the edge of the galaxy, in a spur our charts had marked empty, there was a species that outlasts them. And if there was one human station, there were more humans. And the Grethul, for all their cruelty, were not stupid. They understood in their world-eating way what I had understood on the high angle in the fourth hour. They understood that you cannot win a war against a thing that will not accept losing. So they did the only sane thing. They left. After Corin lived. I know the young ones expect him to die here. The reconstructions in the education halls always end with the fall, the later, the closing of the eyes, and they let you assume the rest, because a dead hero is a cleaner story than a living one. But he lived. The wound was terrible and the medics were exhausted, and old Vess, the Silmiri who had frozen at his severed leg 100 days before, did not freeze this time. She had learned human anatomy in the interim, learned it because of him, because he had made her want to understand the strange, soft creatures she was going to be patching up. She put him back together. It took a long time. He walked on 2 crude legs after that, and he never ran for 2 hours again, and I think a part of him grieved that, quietly, folded up and set aside for later like everything else. But he lived, and he stayed in the coalition, and the story of Caldine went out across the 9 species and then across the whole war, and it changed things. It changed the war, I think. The other species had been fighting the Grethul the old way, bravely, and by the numbers, holding until the math said hold no longer, dying well, accepting. And the story of 11 humans who bought 6 hours out of 2 taught the rest of us a thing we had not known we could learn. You can argue with the numbers. Not always. Not everyone can do it the way the humans do. It is in them in a way it is not in us. Some ancient thing left over from days of walking after wounded animals across a hot, bright world we had never seen. But we learn to do a little of it. We learn to look at the no the universe hands you and treat it not as a fact but as an argument. We learn to fold up our pain and set it aside for later. We learn to interrogate our fear and keep only the useful pieces. We learned it from them, from him. And slowly, world by world, cycle by cycle, the coalition stopped losing. The thought I turned down. I said earlier that in the 5th hour I had a thought I did not want to have, and I turned it down. I set it aside for later. It is later now. I am old and my knee does not bend the way a knee should, and I sit in the visitor gardens of Caldine, which is a shrine now, not a shabby or processor but a place of pilgrimage, with Corin's name carved into the wall of the Remembrance Hall along with the 400 who held the rings. I have earned the right to say the thought out loud. The thought was this. I was glad the humans were on our side. Everyone always says that at the end of these stories. Thank the ancestors the humans were on our side. And it is true, and I am grateful, and if they had not been on our side the Grethul would have eaten us all. But I sat with a dying human in my arms in the throat of the 3rd ring, and I understood the terrifying truth about his species, and the truth did not stop being terrifying just because it was pointed at our enemies. Someday the Grethul will be gone. Someday the war will end. And someday, perhaps, the humans and the rest of us will find ourselves on different sides of some argument the way species always eventually do. And on that day, if we are the numbers the humans refuse to accept, if we are the no they decide the universe does not get to have the last word on, then the ancestors help us. Because I have seen what it looks like when a human decides you cannot be allowed to win. I have seen it stand back up with a lance through its body. I have seen it fight for 4 hours past death on a leg that was not real. I have seen it smile and say later and refuse to fall until the job was done. And I do not think there is a wall high enough, or a fleet large enough, or a number cruel enough to stop a thing that will simply keep coming. Never faster, never slower, never stopping. For days if it has to. That is the truth Corin Voss taught me, the one I turned down that night and have carried ever since. It is not the truth in the education halls. It is not the clean, bright hero story the young ones learn. It is the true one. The humans are the gentlest, kindest, most loyal soldiers I ever served beside. And they are the most frightening thing this galaxy has ever produced. And those two truths are not opposites. They are the same truth. They always were.